Quartermaster General is a game system that I enjoyed since it first came out. The first one was about World War II, then there was another one about the Cold War, and now, although 1914 is not new, it has been around for a while, now I finally got to try it. And I don't always play games the second they come out, although I do try. So Quartermaster General 1914, The Great War, playable in the Quartermaster system, Quartermaster General system, which means a simple yet very detailed card-driven system that depicts immensely complicated events in a way that is playable in 2 hours or so. So pretty impressive. Here's the board. And it represents the area of the conflict, with the United States, of course, there a bit on the side, Central Europe as well at the center, but also there is an emphasis on the Middle East. We have 5 factions, and they will always be in play, regardless of number of players, so you will always have these 5 decks, and they're just distributed among players differently depending on the number of players. We're always gonna have Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, France and Italy, and the UK and the United States. So each faction has its own deck. Suppose you're playing with 2 players, then one player will have this deck, Germany of course, and the Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, and the other player will control those 3 decks. They're shuffled differently, they will give you a different hand of cards, different piles, different discard piles, and different stacks of prepared cards. We'll see what that means in case you're not familiar with the system. Each deck has a variety of cards that will allow you to do different things, such as building an army, building a navy, launching a land battle, playing an event, which is a one-time thing. And then you do what it says and the card is discarded. But then we have status cards that stay face up in front of you, and they'll give you lasting effects. So we're gonna play cards to do what the title and or the text says. But then you see there are also symbols here at the bottom. Those symbols only apply the card is being prepared. The prepare step is the last step of a player's turn before the draw step. So basically the last step in which you decide to do something, in which you can decide to do something. If you decide to prepare a card, it goes face down in front of you in a dedicated stack, and these cards can be used later, this time ignoring the top effect and only using the bottom effect. And again, since the prepare step is at the end of your turn, that means that in a turn you will be able to use prepared effects only if you prepare them in previous turns, and that represents, of course, long-term planning. So, for example, these icons here can be used to supplement a land battle to give it extra defense or extra attack powers. These other effects here that, again, you need to have prepared in advance can be used to create attrition against the enemy. All important, of course, in a game about World War I. So, gameplay is really pretty simple. At the beginning of a player's turn, the player can choose to draft. That means they can discard 2 cards from hand in the discard pile, and they can then look through the deck to look for an army or a navy. Very important because, well, you should have indeed some freedom to bring some on the board if you really need it and your hand doesn't have any. Discarding cards is a common thing, but it's also very costly. As in other Quartermaster General games, not all decks are created equal. Some are much thicker or thinner than others. As you see here, this deck here will run out of cards faster than that one. And that's super important because when your deck is done, your deck is done. You don't automatically reshuffle your discard pile to make a new deck. There may be game effects that from time to time let you take cards from your discard pile, but by and large, when a card is discarded because of a discard effect or replayed, it's out, it's gone. And once you don't have cards anymore, well, that's bad, including the fact that you lose victory points if you are forced to say discard a card and you don't have any available, say in your draw pile or in your prepared pile. And again, the capabilities of the countries have been abstracted in this very simple, very very effective way by simply giving a faction more or fewer cards. So you can discard cards to look for a build an army or build a navy card. Then you get to the play step, which is, well, actually the main step, in which, again, you're simply playing a card and do what it says, which may be, again, suppose the Germans have decided to play a build an army, and then they're building it, and they're just, by doing so, they can take control of an area. Oopsie. Sorry, guy in Burgundy, there was a paratrooper from the sky. And so, for example, there. When to build an army, you need to build it where it would be supplied, and a game piece counts as supplied if there is an uninterrupted line of friendly pieces from the capital of that faction to wherever it is that you're going. So from there, I can build a German piece there because it will be supplied from Berlin through Western Germany into Belgium. And there, you can also have supply through water if you have the corresponding pieces. So for example, if Moscow builds a piece in Ukraine, then because then they can reach the Black Sea, they build a navy in the Black Sea, and then all of a sudden, booyah, they're popping up in Anatolia, maybe threatening a piece that the Ottoman Empire had built there. So that's how supply works, that's how building navies and armies works, meaning you play a corresponding card and you place a piece where it is supplied. When, suppose as the game proceeds, France has done that, the Italians are coming also from Rome into the Italian Alps. Oh, but then the Austrians really don't like to have the Italians next door, so they're taking control of the Tyrol. So that's how the board may look like after a couple of turns. You see those stars, of course, the purpose is to take control of those objectives as to take and retain control of those objectives as much as possible. A big thing, of course, will be to play battle cards launching against sea battles and land battles. And so suppose that now the German player during their play step has played a land battle and declared an attack from Belgium against Picardy. Of course, you can only attack if you have adjacent pieces. Now, when you launch the attack, the opponent has a chance of playing / revealing basically prepared cards that they may have prepared in advance. And when you're the defender, the symbols that you want to play are the shield symbols, these symbols here in a land battle, and there are equivalent ones in naval battles. So if the defender reveals a number of prepared shields, then the attacker may choose to reveal a number of prepared little arrows, and they cancel each other out. So basically the defender and then the attacker can go back and forth revealing prepared cards, trying to reinforce their defenses or their attacks. If the shields match or outnumber the initial attack plus possible arrows, then the defender has won and the attack has no effect. Otherwise, if the initial attack is not countered or there are more prepared arrow symbols than there are prepared shield symbols, then the defender removes their pieces from there. And that's again a big thing that will happen during the play step if a land or sea battle have been played. In most of the cases, it's pretty simple. You play a card and you're building an army or resolving a one-time effect. After the play step, then the active player has the attrition step, in which they may discard a single prepared cards, again if it was prepared from previous turns, and resolve the attrition effect, which indicates a number of cards that a faction or multiple factions of the opponent must discard. And when you discard a card, it may be discarded from the top of your deck, it may be discarded from your hand, it may be discarded from from your prepared pile, and or any combination of those. And that's attrition. We're in the Great War, so that's important. So after that, you may choose to prepare a card, also to unprepare a card. That means there may be a card that you put in your prepare stack early, and you decide to put it back into your hand, and finally you draw cards. And that's at a glance all the steps, and again the order in which you take them is so important. Again, preparing being at the end, so that well, you need to have them there if you wanna take advantage of prepared cards later when you are launching a battle, or when you're defending against one, and or when you are causing attrition. That's the idea. You go through, so the players take their turns, and the order in which they take them also is important. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires go first, then Russia, then Germany, then finally France and Italy and the United States. After you go through all of those steps, that completes a turn, a round, and then you go to the next. And the next. And from time to time, you will score when after round 3, after round 7, 11, 15, and at the end of the game. During a scoring round, it's super simple. You simply count the victory points based on control of stars on the board. And there is a number of them printed on the board at the beginning. Then there are card effects that may place more of those, indicating areas that become active points of interest. So Burgundy may become an active area of interest. Greece may become an active area of interest, and so on and so forth. So the board literally changes as the game progresses, and won't necessarily change the same way from game to game. There may be also other status cards that will give extra victory points to players during the scoring phase. So you count victory points based on control of different things, for example, like that. Based on control of different things, and based on status cards. And of course, you adjust victory points on the victory track. If a player is at least 12 points ahead of the other, I should say, if a side is at least 12 points ahead of the other in a scoring phase, then that side wins immediately. Otherwise, you continue to play until, well, again, a player has that much advantage, which allows them to win the game immediately, or until the end of the game. Then, after final scoring, the side with the most points wins the game. If you like previous Quartermaster General games, the short version of my conclusion is you're gonna like this one also. Chances are you're gonna love it. This is an excellent implementation of a system that has been strong from the beginning, and it works very well here. Maybe even better than in some of the previous ones. All the things that you probably loved from previous games, if you played them, are here. In particular, that amazing way in which an uncanny number of historical details and elements and mechanics and dynamics are hardwired into the decks. You don't have to worry about a million specific rules. Oh, if you're playing with that faction, remember to decrease your number of supply points here. Remember to apply this thing. You don't have to, because you have a smaller decks, and you're in trouble if you are too liberal in your expenditures early on. Maybe, however, there are ways in which this still makes sense. Again, you're not forced to play conservatively. You can try to gain some major advantages and victories early on, but then you know that it'll be a problem to retain them later on, especially if you're playing with Russia, if you're playing with the old men of Europe, or if you're playing with Italy. Again, it's not that hard to take control of the Italian Alps early on. But then pushing towards Vienna, that's a problem, especially because of the mountainous terrain. You may have noticed on the map some areas are in a brownish pattern. That's difficult terrain. It costs you extra cards to attack in there. Which makes perfect sense, of course, because, well, attacking through the Alps was indeed particularly painful and costly for the Italians. But again, you don't have to remember a lot of rules. So the composition of your deck, how many cards are there, how many cards are there in general, like how many cards of each specific type, the composition, how many pieces you have of each kind. It has been done for you. You have to play historically, and history will tend to reproduce itself through the game by broad strokes, mind you. But it will happen. You will have a sense of history and the general picture just because of how the game has been designed. And to me, that is always a great advantage of the game system, and it's implemented here very well. You do not have to have a rule about the U.S. shouldn't come in too early because there aren't many US cards in the US and UK deck, and so it'll take you a while for you to build those forces to get them across the ocean. The card with the Zimmerman telegram will speed things up, as it should be historically. It is just very, very nice again how history is reproduced economically, yet overall in the big picture faithfully in the game. And then it's great to have a game that gives you a sense of history, but again, is the game fun to play? Heck yes, because again, history here is turned into an interesting series of dilemmas for the players to solve. And the general flow here is that, well, there are a lot of like easier targets to grab early on, and you want to go and sit on them early on. So you're gonna have the initial impetus as players will try to take control of poor little Belgium, of other areas that are not that difficult to take control of, especially when no one is there yet. And then what happens? By the end of turn 2 or 3, you're gonna have, but round 2 or 3, you're gonna have a little bit of a standstill. Now these armies are sitting next to each other, and they would like to get just a little further than they can. Again, maybe they can expand in the Middle East. That's not too crowded early on. But the center of the board, Europe, is gonna be probably pretty full of troops. And then what are you going to do? You're going to start trying to mount some powerful attacks by preparing cards that will make your land battles more powerful. But what is the other side doing in the meanwhile? They're probably piling up cards with shields to protect themselves, unless they're also trying to mount powerful attacks. So it really reproduces again the flow of battle, but again it also the flow of the war at the strategic level, but again in a situation of tension, of uncertainty. Because, well, I saw my opponent preparing a stack of cards, but are those attack cards? Are those defense cards? Are those attrition cards? And those are very interesting elements to try to figure out, to try to read your opponent. And then, just try your best. Maybe I'm going to send the Italians to attack in a certain areas. And that's when I see that you don't have a lot of defenses prepared there. And then the French or the British will come in and support that overall effort once I know you haven't prepared very well there. But the fact that you don't have a lot of defenses there means that maybe you prepared a lot of attacks, so I may be exposing myself to the possibility of a counterattack. A lot of interesting decisions there in the different phases of the game, which again, they do feel different from one another, from the opening attacks or the opening grabs of victory points, the opening of later areas that have victory points, as again, more victory point markers are placed on the board. And then you got the later game in which everybody feels a little bit tired. Even Germany, you feel like it will look like had infinite resources early on, starts playing a little more conservatively later on. And other factions, they definitely become more dormant towards the end. But again, it's still interesting because you're still deciding how to budget those limited resources. So the diminishing of resources as the game progresses is one big element of the game, and again also has the very interesting element gameplay wise of punctuating the experience, of making the game not 17 turns that are just the same thing, rinse and repeat, but there is a definitely very strong narrative arc that emerges. All in all, I couldn't ask for anything more from a war game, because here I have a game that shows me the general dynamics of history in a way that is intuitive and easy to play and fun to play, and also is well produced. The game looks great, the cards are just easy to use and very evocative. And again, there's a lot of Chrome and history in them. What else could I want from a war game? Quartermaster General is a system that I enjoyed from the beginning, and I'm very, 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 very happy with the 1914 implementation.